Well, see, they were waiting there at the door. Good evening, folks. And if you can test out the chat for me, let me know where you're coming from tonight and you're watching us from. We always like to see where everybody's at. Tennessee, okay. Well, at least I know chat's working. Thank you, East Tennessee, for letting me know the chat worked. Montana, 2 Tennessees. I'm just going to kind of get started here tonight, folks. My name's Laurie Davin, and welcome to NAVTA's 2024 webinar series. And tonight our sponsor is Merck Animal Health. Big thank you out to them. Our topic tonight is Veterinary Team Wellbeing Research, which it's about creating a happier, more energized veterinary team. Our speakers tonight are Dr. Taylor Tillery and Chantel Kuzmiak. I'm sure I did it right or not. And then we also have John with us. Before we get started, just some housekeeping rules. Questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. So please make sure you put your question in the Q&A and not the chat, because the chat's a live feed. So your question could get lost at the end. So again, a true question put in the Q&A. They welcome questions, but they will take them at the end. Also at the end, they will be showing you a screen with a QR code for your CE certificate. So make sure you kind of take a picture of that. If you don't, they're going to send it to me. You can send me an email if you don't have it, and I will get it to you. But right now, I would like to turn this over to John, and he's going to introduce our speakers and get things going. Welcome, John.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much. According to my clock here, we still have a couple of minutes to go until 7 o'clock Eastern. So I'm gonna just pause a little bit, and I do want to remind people that we will be taking questions on this webinar, and so please put them in the Q&A at the bottom, not in the chat. So my name is John Volk. I'm with Brachy Consulting, and I've had the privilege of being involved with Merck in all of the veterinary well-being studies that we've conducted. And we started this work in 2017 and have conducted 4 studies with veterinarians and 2 with veterinary team members. And today you'll be hearing about the results from the veterinary team study. Today we have 2 distinguished presenters. We have Dr. Taylor Tillery, who's a veterinarian, graduate of Oklahoma State University. He practiced veterinary medicine and then recently, I should say a few years ago, joined Merck Animal Health, where he's responsible for partnerships with universities and key industry partners. He also leads the Merck Animal Health Veterinary Student Ambassador Program. Dr. Tillery is passionate about promoting communication, leadership, and financial literacy. He actively mentors future, current, and former foreign veterinarians in career progression. And his professional ambition is to bring about advancements in animal health that elevate the veterinary field as a whole. Also, this afternoon, our primary presenter is Dr. Chantel Kuzmiak. She's a certified veterinary technician. She's dedicated over 20 years to serving the veterinary field as a technician, as a practice manager, and has been involved in a variety of practices, from day practices, emergency practices, and specialty practices. She's been a lead technician, inventory manager, and in charge of OSHA and AHA compliance in her various roles. For the last 5 years, Chantel has been part of the Merck Animal Health team, working primarily in pharmacovigilance. And the pharmacovigilance department is very important because Chantel and her colleagues then answer questions about products that users have. Also, they're in charge of adverse event reporting, and this department plays a crucial role in ensuring the safety and efficacy of veterinary medications. So with that, again, a reminder to put your questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A section. We will deal with those at the end. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Taylor Tillery.
Thanks, John. If we can go to the next slide. I'm really excited to be speaking with you guys briefly this evening about really what it is that makes a team great, right? So how do we get that positive, energized team that's cohesive? And I can think back to my time. I've worked on several of these teams and worked in several clinics where this experience happened. We have now, I think as John stated, done 4 of these well-being studies that really look at general well-being of veterinarians. For the most part, over the last, we've done every 2 years. It's a biennial study. And so this last year was the first time we did something a little different, where we got a pretty substantial response representative of the entire veterinary team, because I believe the veterinary team is so incredibly important towards a clinic performing in the nice realm and having that positive, energized team. So this is the most comprehensive study we've ever conducted, and it was representative of both veterinarians and, like I said, the veterinary team members. And we really looked at the 3 parameters of well-being, burnout, and mental health, and sort of how those affected the practice team. The data, we collected this the very end of last year, and we just kind of brought some of that data together. I first started speaking to this the beginning of this year, so it's really recent. We did submit this to the International Review Board as far as the study, and as I mentioned, we got a really large sampling of all veterinary team members with 2,300 respondents. Chantal, can we go to the next slide, please? I really want to thank all of our partners for making this happen, and specifically NAVTA with regards to all the technician component. We also worked with BHMA to get hospital managers to be able to sample them as well. We did get a lot of our DVM individuals who have participated in this study in the past, and we had a large corporate practice owner who helped us as well with getting a substantial outpouring of individuals to fill out our survey. So you might be wondering what did these respondents look like? And I will say that veterinary technicians or nurses, and for the purpose of this, just so that all of us are clear, when we say veterinary technicians, we mean credentialed. With that, made up almost 50% of the respondents. We had vet assistants, practice managers, receptionists, and kennel assistants as well. When you then look at the breakdown by practice type, you can see that it was predominantly companion animal related, whether it was exclusive or predominant. We did have a smattering of representatives from the other species groups. And then when we look at the type of primary practice, it was about 80% of the respondents for general practice, specialty, or ER, with urgent care and some of the other ones also falling in there as well. Additionally, looking at the profile, when we look at who is the veterinary team, what we see as that roughly the 44% of individuals fall between the ages of 25 and 34, 28% fall between 35 and 44. We do have some that fill in the 55 to 64, and interestingly enough, you see there like 1% were over 65, and so I'm excited that we still have some wise folks in as well. Looking at the race and ethnicity component of it, notice that our profession, whether we look at veterinarians or veterinary team members, it appears that white is predominant. We do see, notice it 89 plus 14 does not equal 100. I recognize that. Hispanic, we're able to, is also representative, but we are not the most diverse of professions, I think is what you'll notice based off of that data. Generationally, notice that 80% of our respondents were millennial or Gen Z, making up the team. And then when we look at gender, men make up 18%, women make up 79%, and 3% being others. So that's sort of what our respondent profile looks like. We did get a representation from the entire United States in this survey. There is a stronger representation coming out of the South and the West, is what I would say. As well as when we look at the data as far as geographically, we have 32% coming from urban, 22% coming from mid-sized cities, almost 40% coming from suburbia, and a really small representation still representing small towns. So I'd say mostly large city to suburban communities is what we see represented, as well as a companion animal focus. So the agenda we're going to cover today, I'm going to turn it over momentarily to Chantel. Chantel is one of our veterinary technicians on the Merck team. Many of you might not know, we actually on our Merck US team, we have over 150 veterinarians and veterinary technicians, comprehensive of all different roles within our organization, whether it's pharmacovigilance, veterinary professional services, marketing, et cetera, R&D, continuous. So we have a lot of veterinary professionals, and Chantel is going to go through all of our key findings, where she'll touch on all the details. So for some of you that want to then like tune out, I understand. And then she's going to go into the detailed findings where she'll cover well-being, mental health, burnout. She'll talk about the tools we use to analyze all those, get into kind of some of the meat and potatoes, I would say. And then she's going to follow up all of this with the action steps, right? And so what specifically can veterinary team members do on as an individual, and then what can maybe your employers do as well? I'm going to come back on at the end to kind of take us home with our conclusion, and then we'll have John in the background. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A component. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can throughout the evening. Those that we can't get to, we'll hopefully touch on, or we'll follow up on those as well, or provide resources for you. So I will join back at the end of the conclusion. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Chantel. And Chantel, take us away and go through the key findings for this group.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tillery. So we will start things off by looking at our well-being study's key findings. And in our study, we found that the veterinary team is invested and takes great pride in their work, and that a majority of respondents were satisfied with their job. And there was a noticeable difference in well-being among the veterinary team roles. We noted that significant financial stress was a common concern among the team members. And lastly, there are multiple steps that individuals and practices can take to improve their staff's well-being. And veterinary work is important and very meaningful to the team. And overwhelmingly, 81% of respondents were either agree or strongly agree that they are invested and take great pride in their work. And 61% stated that they felt their supervisor treated them with respect and valued their work. And 68 stated they felt that their work makes a positive contribution to people's lives. And then 61% felt that they have a warm, friendly, and supportive relationship with their coworkers. So overall, the team is generally satisfied with their jobs. And the study showed that vets and hospital administrators were more satisfied with their jobs than the general population and other staff members. And the general population showed up that 51% were extremely or very satisfied with their job, while 45% of vet technicians and 48% of vet assistants were extremely or very satisfied with their job. So now we'll move into our more detailed findings of the well-being study. And for this study, 3 major components were measured. And these were for veterinary team members, their well-being, the burnout, and mental health. So let's go over how we define well-being, burnout, and mental health. So well-being is how people view their welfare level in terms of happiness, health, prosperity, resources. For burnout, it's a state of exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional, resulting from prolonged stress. And mental health is measured by psychologists and is the condition of an individual's mental and emotional state, which includes the prevalence or the absence of serious psychological distress. And well-being has been measured in the US and global populations for many years now. And in the US, well-being is measured daily by Gallup and has been around for about 50 years. In well-being research, people are asked questions about how they feel about their life. And a score of 0 is the worst possible life that they could imagine, and 10 is the best possible life that they could imagine. And then the responses are broken down into 3 other different categories. And those who rate their lives 7 to 10 were considered flourishing, 4 to 6 were getting by, and 0 to 3 were considered suffering. And what we found in the veterinary team is that about 42% are flourishing with very high levels of well-being, and about 7% are in the suffering category. And the rest, a little over 50%, said that they were just getting by. And we noted that well-being did vary somewhat by position. So breaking this down, we see that 33.6% of vet assistants and 42.6% of veterinary technicians felt that they were flourishing, whereas hospital managers, administrators were flourishing higher at 52.3%. And one of the things that we need to understand is that people's personalities play a major role in determining their well-being, burnout, and mental health. And psychologists measure personality using what we call the Big Five or the 5-factor model. And personality is scored on 5 characteristics, and they are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And these characteristics people have pretty much their entire lives, but you really cannot change a person's personality characteristics, but you can manage them. And it's important to recognize that each of us score somewhere from the 1 to 5 of these characteristics. And no one is truly extroverted or introverted, rather, you appear somewhere on the extroversion scale between 1 and 5. And neuroticism has a greater impact on well-being, burnout, and mental health than the other 4. They are all important. However, neuroticism has a higher degree of influence. And we find that the veterinary team members scored higher in neuroticism than the general population did. And on this slide to the left-hand bars, you'll see that it's measuring neuroticism. And the black is the general population at 2.6. And the other 4 bars are for the veterinary team, which is averaging about 3.1. And the chart to the right is extroversion. We see that the general population score is 3.2. Again, this is out of 5. And the veterinary team is 3.3 to 3.5. And the veterinary team is in a client service business, and having a high extroversion personality is a big plus. And it means that you really do enjoy working with people. And I chuckle at that statement because when I attended tech school, my introduction to veterinary science professor told our entire class on day 1 that if you're in this profession just because you love animals and you want to avoid people, that it's not going to work out so much. And when we did the research, it was found that several characteristics were either predictive of higher levels of well-being or lower levels of well-being. And so the characteristics that were predictive for higher levels of well-being were people who worked in a positive clinic culture and those who participated in healthy activities, and people who are satisfied in their position, and then those who develop good strategies for coping with stress. And we find that neuroticism is a characteristic of people who are more vulnerable to stress. and they're often the glass half empty person or characterized as worriers. And the negative predictors for well-being are those with long work hours and neuroticism. So people who score higher in neuroticism have more challenges with stress and can have lower levels of well-being. We'll move to measuring burnout. So burnout, we use the burnout assessment tool. And this tool has been developed over the past 5 to 10 years, and it's originally from European researchers and has been academically validated all around the world. And this tool gives us 5 measures of burnout. So one is overall burnout, and then 4 subcomponents of burnout, which are cognitive impairment, emotional impairment, exhaustion, and mental distance. And here we see about 3/4 of the vet team members had a low to medium burnout, and about a quarter have higher to very high burnout. And then when we looked at the component scores, we see one that stands out. And the vet team members scored much higher in exhaustion than in the other components. And the other 3 components are attributes we usually associate with compassion fatigue. Exhaustion, being mentally and physically tired, is a major component of burnout among vet team members. And we noted that burnout varied amongst vet team roles. So veterinary technicians and assistants had a higher percentage of respondents being high to very high for burnout, while CSRs had the lowest percentage of represented respondents in the high to very high level for burnout. And the veterinary team burnout is higher than that of the general population. And here we have overall burnout, which is the top 3 lines of the slide, and exhaustion, which is on the lower 3 lines of this slide. And we pulled out low burnout and high, very high burnout for comparison reasons. So the first bar is the US general population, with 84% having lower burnout and 16% with higher burnout. And practice managers, administrators have a similar percentage as the general population, with 80% lower burnout and 20% higher burnout. The other staff members, vet techs, assistants, and CSRs, fall into a higher burnout rate of 28%. And for exhaustion, about 2/3 of the general population had a lower exhaustion rate of 32%, where the other vet team members, which included vet techs and assistants, had a lot higher exhaustion score of 72%. So what are the predictors for higher and lower burnout? So positive predictors are those who have a good work-life balance, being satisfied with your position and promotional opportunities, and working in a positive clinic culture. Also having coping strategies to deal with stresses. And the negative predictors for low burnout were those that scored higher in neuroticism, had long work hours, negative work environment, and student debt. So we'll now switch to mental health. So mental health in this case is a measurement of serious psychological distress. And psychologists have developed the tool called the Kessler-6 to measure serious psychological distress. And for this, you answer 6 questions about how frequently you feel about certain things. And a certain score defines if you have a serious psychological distress or not. And in our study, nearly 80% of the clinic staff did not suffer from distress. And just over 20% of the clinic staff did suffer from distress. And again, serious psychological stress did vary by position. So breaking it down by roles within the practice, we see that nearly 90% of hospital administrator practice managers did not suffer from serious psychological distress. And 73.8% of veterinary assistants and 79.9% of veterinary technicians were not distressed. However, veterinary technicians, assistants, and CSRs were reported to have higher serious psychological distress than those from who are veterinarians and hospital administrators and practice managers. And so what are the predictors for good mental health? So positive predictors are, again, having strategies in place to cope with stressors, having healthy activities, a good work-life balance, and having satisfaction with your position or promotional opportunities at your workplace. And then the negative predictors look actually familiar, and we see them in well-being and burnout. And again, they are high neuroticism, being in a negative work environment, having long work hours, and student debt. And at the beginning of the veterinary team survey, we asked the team members to rate 14 issues. We asked them to rate them as not an issue at all, a minor issue, moderately important issue, or a crucially important issue. And these questions range from management issues to issues with the veterinary profession. And the number one issue that was rated as the most critically important was poor compensation for veterinary staff at 68%. And other issues that were highly rated were stress levels of veterinarians and the staff, suicide rate among vets and staff members, and the shortage of qualified veterinary support staff members. And when we asked the team members how satisfied they were with their job, 73% were somewhat, very, or completely satisfied. When the respondents were asked how satisfied they were with their personal income or financial situation, the scores were actually much lower. Nearly 60% of veterinary team members felt unsatisfied with their financial income and financial situations. And their financial situations were very worrisome to a lot of them when they took this survey. And what we did find in the survey is that about 1 in 4 team members have a second job outside of the veterinary practice. And some have a second job within the practice as well. And veterinary technicians and assistants had the highest percentage of the team members who had a second job, and CSRs were at the lowest. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that the mean student debt for each role. And student debt per role ranged between $12,000 to $15,000. And with many of the younger team members, they are the ones who carried this student debt. Another part of the financial stress among team members is that a majority of them carried credit card debt and didn't pay off their debt monthly. And credit card debt varied by role, but 57 to 61% carry a monthly balance on their credit cards. And credit card debt is actually the most expensive debt that you can carry. And in 2023, the average US credit card interest rate was just over 21%. About 47% of all credit card carriers carried a credit card balance. And this percentage was actually less than the clinic staff members' percentage who carried a balance. So this demonstrated the financial stress the clinic team members were under. There are several action steps that individuals and practices can take to reduce burnout and psychological distress and boost well-being. So let's start out with the action steps that employees can take to create a more positive and energized team. First thing is to create a more constructive clinic culture. And we know that good clinic culture significantly contributes to well-being, mental health, and reduces staff turnover. And there are 4 factors we found in our study that were associated with good clinic culture. And these were having a strong sense of belonging to the team, sufficient time allotted for high quality patient care, a high degree of trust in the organization, and having candid and open communication among team members. And out of all team members, veterinarians indicated the highest level of satisfaction compared to the other team members, with hospital administrators, managers coming in at the second highest. So the other staff members, which includes technicians, assistants, and CSRs, they were felt at a lower degree, which indicates that we have some work to do to make these staff members feel included in our practice culture. So how can we improve the psychological safety within the workplace? So by having healthy, frequent discussions, it will remove the feelings of isolation and creating opportunities for safely discussing mental health within the practice. Use team meetings to highlight well-being resources offered to your employees. And discussing challenges and highlighting positives from the past week can help alleviate stress in your team. And during our survey, 12% openly discussed well-being and mental health in team meetings, with 27% discussing these topics somewhat. And these numbers show that there's plenty of room for improvement in this area for enhancing staff members' psychological safety within the practice. And another solution is to create opportunities for advancement for team members. And this can be in the form of financial advancement, position, or role advancement. So let's take a look at some of the things that might be considered for advancement for team members. So ensuring each team member is fully utilized according to their training is crucial. Many technicians feel underutilized and limited to basic tasks like animal handling. And I can relate to this statement as I felt this many times in various practices over my years. So when we maximize our skills, we feel more engaged and satisfied in our roles. Providing learning opportunities for team members to grow their skills. We need to make sure we are paying for the team members' learning and development, providing continuing education tailored to staff duties, or conducting in-clinic training sessions. The team can enhance and acquire new skills. And it's important to create a career path with growth and compensation opportunities for our team members. Making sure that you're providing advancement in financial growth will help alleviate that financial stressor we talked about. And providing scheduling flexibilities is also an important factor to our team members. Having a feeling of autonomy with their work schedule and work tasks can be very important and can create a better work-life balance for employees. And lastly, promoting autonomy in the workplace regarding decision making. Promoting team member feedback can help support the changes and growth of the practice, which can facilitate a better workplace for everyone. And employers can offer employee mental health assistant programs and mental health coverage. Employee assistant programs, or EAP, is a resource for our employees to have free access to short-term mental health support and confidential counseling to help support them in whatever challenges they might be experiencing. And these EAPs are not horribly expensive, and I would recommend reaching out to our VMAs, or your state level may offer plans, or adding this benefit to the health insurance that you might already offer to your employees. Having the hospital administrator or manager make sure the staff is aware of what benefits that they may already have offer, making them that information readily available can also help support the team's mental health. And from our survey, we noted that those working in corporate practices were more likely to have an EAP at 61% and mental health coverage at 54%. So this is an area that independently owned practices can work on and try to provide these services to their staff. And other things that we can do in the workplace is to make sure that we are providing access to resources that are beneficial to our team members. And you can do this by bringing in a mental health expert, such as a veterinary social worker. And these social workers deal with all things such as pet bereavement, conflict in the workplace, team dynamics, veterinary well-being, and animal abuse. And being able to call on and bring in someone like this in the event that the team had a traumatic experience can help the team debrief and can be helpful to those team members to continue forward with their work. Providing access to financial advisors for the team members or giving them pro bono resources. And this can help alleviate some of their financial stress by getting them on track with healthy savings, spendings, and payoff plans. Providing access to external peer support groups. And there is an increased number of peer groups that are free to the vet team members and are actually facilitated by mental health professionals. The Veterinary Hope Foundation is a resource that you can look into that provides services at no charge. And lastly, providing continuing education on professional skills and making sure we are invested in CE and continuing to improve or gain new skills. Give our team more training on how to navigate some of the more common challenges and stressors they face daily in the workplace. And by doing this, you can help alleviate or minimize those stressors for them by giving them the knowledge and skills to feel more capable to navigate and cope with these stressors. So now let's look at what individual team members can do to help themselves reduce their levels of stress and improve quality of life. So we know that one of the most important positive predictors for good mental health and well-being in the overall profession is feeling that you have a healthy method for dealing with stress. And what we found that with our team members, most of them were on the agree side that they felt they had a healthy method for dealing with stress in their lives. And some of those effective coping methods were that they were using were to take comfort that problems would work out for themselves, accept the situation without getting caught up in the emotions of them, distracting themselves with TV, computer games, other things, taking care of the problems that cause stress, and making changes in life to actually reduce the stress. And a not so effective way of trying to sweep the stressors under the rug was forgetting about them and hoping that they will just simply go away. So everyone really needs to try to find what really works for you as an individual. Something that might work for me might not necessarily work for you and your lifestyle. Another thing that we can do is to reduce stress is to avoid excess time on social media. And we know that social media can be associated with poor mental stress, mental health, and well-being. Having more than 1 hour per day on social media is associated with serious psychological distress. And we see here that a majority of team members have more than 1 hour of social media a day. And I admit I am totally guilty of doing this myself. So cutting back on our scrolling time in social media can help promote good mental health and foster well-being. And engaging with a financial advisor. So in our survey, it was noted that veterinarians had 50-50 for who had a financial advisor versus who did not. And we noted that only 19 to 29% of other team members had a financial advisor. So working with a financial advisor can help you understand and navigate dealing and working with your credit card debt or student loans. And one resource noted on this slide is the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. And this organization is the country's leading professional association of fee-only financial advisors. Managing your work-life balance effectively. So work-life balance looks different for everyone. How much I manage at work may not be the same that you or someone else can manage. And some of the things that individuals in the study did to manage their work-life balance were to spend time with family, reading for pleasure, doing outside activities, getting at least 8 hours of sleep, exercise, spending time on a hobby, being with friends, traveling for pleasure, volunteering, and meditation. So starting to implement small changes like these or ones that will work for you can help better your mental health. And once you start to set aside a small amount of time for self-care a day, you can start to see how much that makes you feel, which can lead to taking longer periods of time for mental health improvements in the future. And lastly, seeking counseling when needed. So, seeking support for mental health professionals can be very helpful. They can help you come up with individual strategies to help improve your mental health. And when we looked at seeking mental health help, we are seeing improvements in the percentage of those who do get help. However, we still have some work to do to improve those numbers for our veterinary team members. And if you do need mental health help, please seek out support. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Tillery so he can go over our study's conclusions and resources for you.
Thanks, Chantel, for covering all that, and I want to celebrate Chantel. She's one of our amazing veterinary technicians on our Merck team, so I really appreciate her going over that. So, Chantel, I think I'd like to go over a couple of conclusions, hit on a couple of the high points. If you'll hit the next button on there as far as kind of some take homes. So, I think one of the take homes I saw in this data is that veterinarians as well, I would say. So we didn't share the veterinary data with a lot of you. We saw some of it. But what we saw in the data is that veterinary team members and veterinarians really find their work meaningful and important. And when we look at career and job satisfaction, we actually see career and job satisfaction for both veterinary team members, veterinary technicians, and veterinarians. It's at or above the general population. When we compare to the general population, I think it's important to note that our general population comparison is those 25 and older with a college degree. So sort of that's the population we compared to. We see that the satisfaction is fantastic. Even when we see the challenges, right, with personal income and financial situations, I think we do have to speak to the point that we do see well-being, mental health lower than what we consider the general population. And we do see that the veterinary team as a whole, veterinary technicians as well, do have higher burnout than what we see in the general population. Now, I think Chantel touched on a few details about personality. And some of you might not know about your personality type. We'll have a resource here in a second as far as how you can go take an assessment and learn more about your personality. And some of you might have differing personalities. We saw that veterinary technicians or veterinary nurses in general have a personality that's higher in neuroticism, but also higher in extroversion, right? So neuroticism could mean you're more of a perfectionist. You're more predisposed to being sensitive or nervous or anxious, some of those things. And so making sure that you take the time and know about your general personality and know how to better manage that is important. But also using that extroversion component. Veterinary team members in general are more extroverted, and veterinary technicians more extroverted than veterinarians. So some big skills there as well, right, on how you can communicate with the team. And then the poor financial health. Again, I think Chantel went over some resources there, right? I think there's opportunities there for employers. There's opportunities like how do we upskill veterinary technicians? How do we use them to the top of your ability so that you can generate maybe higher compensation? What does that look like? And things like that. So as far as, the research does show that many individuals and practices, there's things that both you as an individual can do and things that both organizations and or your employer can do to improve well-being and improve burnout. And I think we talked and touched on several of those things, and I think I hope some of you take those to note. What I will take the chance to do right now, I think, is make sure that if you do have questions, we do want to answer those, and I see a bunch of them starting to fill into our Q&A box, but do click on the question and answer box. So if we can, we'll start answering those in a second. Chantel, if you'll go to the next slide for me. So as I mentioned, my mentor, Dr. Linda Lord, actually launched this well-being work back in 2017. And it was when like talking about well-being in the veterinary space was something that like nobody wanted to talk about. I'm really excited that we've moved on from there and we have invested significantly in veterinarians and veterinary technicians in building resources, bringing scholarships as well. I think last year was the first year we brought a significant dollar volume in veterinary technician scholarships, which I think is fantastic. A couple of different organizations, we've built out some resources that I want to talk about. At AVMA, we've built some train-the-trainer exercises that are really about professional development on how do we deal with conflict management? How do we have difficult conversations? How do we build self and social awareness? So some really interesting, great things there that we've built out with AVMA. AHA, we built out some culture initiative pieces, and we built on that as well with Not One More Vet, NAMV. We recently launched what we call the Clear Blueprint, which is all about creating a psychologically safe culture within practices. It's one of those certification type of processes that the clinic can undergo and kind of build transformative change to make sure that you have that thriving, successful team, what that looks like. We've also worked with VHMA with the workforce crisis and organizational diagnosis and design as far as what does that look like. And I do want to mention Mentor Vet. So some of you might know Dr. Addie Reinhardt and her team. I know she launched that with a focus on veterinarians. They've recently got into Mentor Vet Tech as well. I think that launched last year. So now there's a technician program really focused on how do we build those social circles? How do we build community? And I think when we talk about what are some of the things you can do as far as healthy activities, work-life balance, one of the things that really stands out to me in that is how do we build community? How do we spend more time with friends, spend more time with family? And some of that comes down to mentorship and coaching. And so I think Mentor Vet Tech is another great resource. Finally, what I will say, some of you asked about where can these resources be found? So if you go to www.vetwellbeing.com, we have most of these resources, as well as we have both of these presentations and the slides available both on the veterinary side and the veterinary team member side. Maybe not specifically this presentation, because we did pull out a few extra details around veterinary technicians or veterinary nurses that I thought might be interesting to this group. And I really appreciate Chantel going through some of that. So Chantel, if you'll click over to the next slide as well. So this is, if you want to take a screenshot or a screen capture, might be a good resource for all of you, because I think this has got a lot of our resources on the left. At the bottom, what I'll point out there is one of them is around how do you know about your personality? There's a free personality assessment you can do to figure out where do you score on those personality assessments, because why it's important to knowing your personality is then recognizing how you may want to manage to your personality and what shortcuts you may or may not want to take. As far as mental health, social work, etc., I think there's some great resources there. And then finally, on the right lower hand corner, it talks about pro bono financial counseling. The good thing is this group, and when we see the reporting from veterinary team members, predominantly millennial or Gen Z, the great thing is working with a financial coach, working with a financial counselor early on means you fall really, you have lots of opportunity to start working on some of these things before before the train gets off the track, essentially, right? So I would encourage you to look at some of these financial resources and reach out. It's never too early to start working with a financial counselor to make sure that your financial health and your financial well-being is in a good place. So if you'll go to the next slide. So this is where you can now pull out your cellular device, your iPhone, your Android device, whatever it may be. And if you will shoot a picture of that, the QR code, I think we all learned how to do this in a COVID world where everybody quit using their menus. And I have to admit, I'm like a millennial boomer-esque type of thing. I felt like I'm like, where's the menu at? But if you'll scan this QR code, and if you'll put in the verification code, it is VTW4TTY. You'll be able to get your C. Or if you want to actually hover over the link, I think it'll allow you to click on. It may allow you to click on that. I'm not sure if it allows you to do that in Zoom component, but it may or may not. If not, pull out your phone, or again, take a screenshot of this so that you can get your 1 hour. This is a race CE presentation. So I want to also close by thanking all of you for everything that you do. I know that I wouldn't be where I'm at as a veterinarian without the amazing teams that I've really surrounded myself with. I've learned so much from technicians. I've worked with some amazing technicians that were much more skilled than myself in a lot of things. I've also worked with veterinary assistants and hospital managers that really created that magical experience, that created that happy, healthy, environment. So I think that's one of the things that we want to take away. And John, I think we've got maybe some questions, Chantel, if we can go to the next slide. Hopefully everybody was able to capture that. John, have we gotten any questions that we could maybe, Chantel or I could perhaps try to address?
Yes, by all means. Thank you, Dr. Tillery and Chantel, for your excellent presentation. We are getting questions from a few sources here, and by all means, we have some time available. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. So we'll start going through these. One is, will these slides be available afterwards? And I think the answer is yes, a couple of ways. One, Dr. Tillery mentioned that vetwellbeing.com has copies of the PowerPoint presentations, but Lori, perhaps you can explain how the NAVTA organization makes it available.
Well, we would have to have them, one of you would have to send them to us, and then I could forward them just to the people that reach out to me.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we can send a PDF of the slides, and Taylor, Dr. Tillery, does that work? So
yeah, we can send the slides out. Or what I would encourage everybody to do is if they'll go to www.vetwellbeing.com, we have the slides posted there in a PDF form. We also have the veterinary slides there. We have some additional resources. And what I will say is we will have a couple of publications hopefully coming both on the veterinary data and the veterinary team data that'll be peer reviewed. So look for those in the near future. We haven't gotten there yet, so I don't want to say for sure we'll have it, but I think we've submitted several publications. It should be there. So I would encourage people to go to www.vetwellbeing.com. And if you just search that in Google, you should be able to find the slides are already available on there.
Thanks,
good.
Dr.
Thank you.
Tillery, for putting in the link for the CE. Someone asked you, and thank you for doing that. So if you need that link's in the chat for the CE.
Okay. Another question is, what's the difference in the discussion of coping mechanisms? What's the difference between the coping techniques of distraction with TV or games, whatever, and trying to forget about it? That's really a great question, and I can tell you that the psychologists on the research team do not consider distraction to be a very ideal coping mechanism. But in the analysis of the study, distraction did have a slightly positive correlation with stress reduction, whereas trying to forget about it had a negative correlation with stress reduction. So it did not reduce stress at all. So that was in the data analysis, but certainly neither one of those are very powerful ways to deal with stress. So another question is, did veterinarians and veterinary team members take the same survey?
So I think that was John, if I recall, it was pretty similar. We tried to make it as similar as we could, but there were a few things where it was a little different, but it was similar for the most part, but it just broke down a little different based off of role, if I recall. Is that correct, John? That would be your take on it?
Yes, that's right. There were two different questionnaires. There was a great deal of overlap. So for example, the key metrics of well-being, mental health, and burnout, the questions were the same for both parties. But the overall questionnaires were different, and they were tailored to the specific roles of the various respondents. So the they were similar, but they were different questionnaires. Another question was how was clinic culture assessed? And that may be one I should take, Dr. Tillery.
Yeah,
So,
John, why don't you take that one on culture? I think that's a great thing to break down. Go ahead.
yeah, so clinic culture turned out to be, of all the things that employers can do, having a positive clinic culture was the most associated with good well-being, high levels of well-being, low levels of burnout, and low levels of serious psychological distress. And the way we got at the clinic culture was from various instruments, questionnaires that had been developed about organizations. We had about 20 different factors that we included in the questionnaire, and what we learned through analysis with veterinary teams was that there were really 4 that defined a positive clinic culture for the veterinary community, and those 4 work together to reinforce each other, and they really separated themselves from all the other characteristics that an organization might have. And as you recall, they were things like having a sense of trust throughout the organization, good communication across the team, having time to do quality work, and there was the 4th one, escapes me for a minute, but it's in the presentation. But those 4 really really stood out as defining what a good clinic culture was. So it was a matter of asking about a lot of different aspects of the work environment and finding out which ones were most positively correlated with good outcomes. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think one other question that I saw that came in there it went in the chat, not so much the Q&A, but I think there was some discussion around student debt and with regards to veterinary assistants as compared to veterinary technicians. Do you want to talk about maybe sort of how we assessed student debt and why we thought that was important and what we saw with the correlations there?
Yeah, a good point, Dr. Tillery. So as far as learning about student debt, I mean, we asked respondents specifically if they had student debt, and if so, how much they had. And what we found was that I think about 50% of all team members had student debt, and certainly more among younger team members than older team members, and then of those who had student debt, how much they had. And the thing that I guess surprised me was the number of people that do have student debt in fairly large amounts. And the other thing that intrigued me was that in this survey, almost 75% of veterinary technicians had 4-year college degrees. And I knew they had college, but I didn't know that it was that high of a percentage had 4-year degrees. So when you have a 4-year college degree, and then with the mean incomes that a lot of people are making, it's understandable why it's tough to pay down that debt. But student debt is, as you may know, is a problem across the U.S., and the government has been looking for ways to reduce that student debt. But and I think the other component of that is just in several ways understanding how what a great financial stress is. One of the things that did surprise us was that well over half of veterinary team members are carrying credit card debt. That's really expensive debt. It's harder to pay back than almost any other debt you can have, and what we found is that there's a correlation between people who work with a financial advisor and their well-being. And those people who do work with a financial advisor have much higher levels of well-being and much lower levels of serious psychological distress than those who don't. And you don't have to be wealthy to have a financial advisor. There are financial advisors in your community. There's pro bono financial help available. If you're an individual that has a lot of financial stress, a lot of student debt, a lot of credit card debt, I really advise you to get in touch with the financial advisors in your community and get some assistance in working out budgets and a plan to pay that debt down. If you can pay down your credit card debt, you'll be amazed at how much better your outlook in life is. So.
Yeah, thanks, John. I will say, I think several people are asking about the link to the CEA. I will say that we did put it in the chat. So you can find it. It's the bit.ly and
There you go.
Slide. Yeah, so you can scan it as well if you need to. And again, the code is VTW4TTY. As well as I put the link to our website, vetwellbeing.com is where you can find a lot of the resources, the slides. I think this presentation will be recorded and we'll have it out to all of our NAVTA members as well post this presentation. So I think, Chantel, do you have any closing thoughts you want to leave this group with? I'll leave that to you if you've got anything you'd like to leave this group with.
Just that, mental health is very important at work as well as at home. I would just highly advise taking the time to research what your personality is and just take the necessary steps to alleviate any type of stress if possible that you can. It'll really make a difference in your personal life as well as your health and happiness at work.
Yeah, thank you, Chantel, for that. And John, we really appreciate all your work on this since going back to 2017. I really appreciate you joining us this evening as well. I will close by saying that, we at Merck Animal Health are really appreciative of all the work that all the veterinary team members do, specifically veterinary technicians and veterinary nurses. And we appreciate you jumping on this call today, and we really have appreciated being able to work with NAVTA to get this great data collected, and then in return create this presentation to be able to provide some insights as well as some objective things that you can do to continue to improve both your health or those of your peers. I think the good thing for me, again, as a take home, is that general career and job satisfaction within the veterinary profession is incredibly high. But we do have some challenges, right, with veterinary team members around personal income and financial situation. And I think there's opportunities there for improvement. And I hope we continue to make some of those. So with that, I want to wish everybody a good evening. And Lori, do you have anything you want to tell this group before we shut it down?
I just would like to thank all of you, Dr. Tillery, Chantel, and John, and Mark for sponsoring and with NAVTA tonight. And if you can get me that slide or that copy of that certificate information, if I can have it, just in case anybody does need it tomorrow, I can email it to them. And thank you for your expertise, and everyone have a great evening.
Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.